My name's Ethan, and long before my marriage finally imploded, I was already standing at the edge mentally packing my bags. For a while, it felt like I was living in a slow fade, a gradual dimming of shared life rather than a vibrant partnership. But the tipping point, the undeniable sign that it was time to go, came during a family barbecue when I was openly mocked. That night, after everyone had left and the house finally settled into a quiet hum, I simply vanished. My wife Sarah and I had been married for a little over 8 years. In the beginning, we were like most couples, deeply connected, full of plans. We didn't just want a house, we wanted a home, a true sanctuary. That was the dream we both signed up for, and for a while we chased it together with an almost feverish enthusiasm. But somewhere around year 5, things began to subtly shift. It wasn't sudden, and that's precisely what made it so insidious, so hard to pinpoint. The real turning point, however, arrived when we started trying for kids. We both wanted them desperately, with a longing that echoed in our quiet conversations. But as months bled into years with no success, our journey led us down the path of fertility clinics, endless appointments, countless injections, invasive tests, and rigid schedules. We tried everything they told us to, clinging to every last shred of hope. Each month brought a fresh wave of optimism, only to end in a silent disappointment that seemed to thicken the air like smoke, suffocating us slowly. I watched helpless as it took its toll on Sarah. She grew quieter, more withdrawn, her once bright eyes dimming with each passing cycle. At first, I attributed it to stress. We were both hurting after all. But somewhere along the line, she stopped trying altogether, not just with the treatments, but with me too. I believe she gave up on the dream of children when it became too painful to bear, and with that, it felt as though she let go of our marriage as well. The affection that once flowed so freely between us evaporated, replaced by a cold, polite distance that felt colder than any argument. We still lived under the same roof, slept in the same bed, and ate at the same table, but it felt like I was living with a stranger, and the silence between us grew heavier with each passing day. What cut the deepest was that she didn't seem to notice, or perhaps didn't seem to care. She had simply shut down emotionally, a fortress built around her pain. I, ever the optimist, tried to convince myself that love meant holding on even when the other person had let go. About a year and a few months before everything completely unraveled between Sarah and me, her sister Olivia showed up on our doorstep. She had just gone through an absolutely brutal split with her husband. I'm talking full-blown shouting matches, nasty cheating allegations, and even the police being called to their house a few times. It was an unholy mess, and understandably, she desperately needed a break. Sarah came to me, her voice laced with concern, asking if Olivia could crash with us for a few days, just until she could figure things out. Of course I said yes. It was the decent thing to do. Olivia had 2 little kids, innocent bystanders, who hadn't asked for any of this chaos. So they arrived with a few bags looking like they planned an overnight stay, but those few days quickly started to stretch into an indefinite residency. I initially figured Olivia just needed a couple of extra days to sort out her next move, but then those days morphed into a couple of weeks. She didn't talk about finding a job or getting her own place or even going back to the town she'd left behind. Her belongings started taking over our guest room, then spilling into other parts of the house. The kids' toys were everywhere. The living room, the kitchen, even our bedroom at times. Their clothes got mixed in with our laundry. Still, I held my tongue, hoping for some miraculous shift. But then a couple of weeks turned into a month, then 2. Before I knew it, we were deep into the 3rd month, and she was still in the house. I had an entire other family living under my roof. And no one, it seemed, thought it was a problem except for me. Sarah's sister was loud, sarcastic, and always had something cutting or slick to say. The kids, bless their hearts, were pure, unadulterated chaos. There was no discipline, no respect for personal space, no sense of control whatsoever. It felt like living inside a daycare run by a drunk circus clown every single day, overflowing with tension. I'd come home from work, utterly exhausted, yearning for just a sliver of peace, only to be met with some new mess or fresh argument. Conversations became a relic of the past. All that remained was conflict. And what truly twisted the knife was that Sarah always took her sister's side. No matter how poorly Olivia behaved, Sarah would find a way to defend her. I'd try to voice my concerns calmly, only to be shot down. She'd offer up tired excuses like, "She's my only sister, Ethan," or, "You can't expect me to throw her out just because they did one thing you don't like." To Sarah, my frustration was simply invalid. There was one instance that forever etched itself into my memory. Olivia was openly mocking me, throwing out digs and snide remarks. Instead of shutting it down, Sarah chimed in with a smirk saying, "Oh, stop it, Ethan. He's sensitive." Then they both laughed, a shared moment of amusement at my expense. I felt utterly humiliated, a profound shame washing over me. It reached a point where I wasn't even sleeping in my own bed anymore. Sarah would let her sister and the kids sleep in our bedroom, leaving me to find space wherever I could, the couch, the guest room, anywhere but my own bed. Now I know some people might hear all this and think, why didn't you just leave? And believe me, I asked myself that very question countless times. But it wasn't that simple. You see, I believed that a significant part of what Sarah was going through was the excruciating pain of not being able to have children. It had crushed her spirit, and I genuinely thought that if we could just get through that, if we could find a way forward together, the love we once shared could somehow rekindle. So I stayed longer than I should have, clinging to the fading hope that our marriage still had a chance. But deep down, a quiet, insidious weariness was setting in. One day, I finally reached that breaking point where love alone simply wasn't enough to keep me rooted in a house where I felt like an absolute stranger. So I booked a quiet, discreet consultation with a divorce lawyer. I laid out the facts, the raw, unfiltered truth of my existence. Weeks after that meeting, the divorce papers were drafted ready to be served. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. Not because I thought she'd change, but because some stubborn, foolish part of me still yearned for her to look at me the way she used to, even if just one more time. As I waited, the suffocating tension in the house didn't ease. I started making a mental to-do list, methodically checking things off one by one. The first thing I did was quietly pack some of my essentials clothes. Important documents, sentimental items, and stored them in old moving boxes. I labeled them vaguely just in case anyone stumbled upon them. After that, I rented a small storage unit outside of town, paying in cash. It was the kind of out-of-the-way place no one would ever think to look. I started slowly moving the boxes there a few at a time, under the cloak of night. I opened a new bank account using a different variation of my name. I bought a new burner phone. I even meticulously picked out a new city somewhere smaller, quieter, a place where I could truly disappear. All of this, I planned it down to the hour, every contingency considered. If my marriage were to truly end, I was ready to vanish like a ghost. But I didn't pull the trigger because despite everything, I still loved her. Somewhere deep inside me, beneath all the hurt and the crushing exhaustion, I was still holding on to the woman I had married. One Saturday, I went out to clear my head for a few hours. When I pulled back into my driveway, there were more cars than usual lining the street, their engines cooling in the afternoon sun. Laughter echoed from the backyard, and I could hear kids yelling and running around even before I opened the front door. I stepped inside, the familiar sounds of a party pulling me forward. The backyard was alive, a chaotic symphony of family gathering. Kids darted around with juice boxes in hand, their shrieks piercing the air. Someone was flipping burgers on the grill, the aroma of charcoal and sizzling meat filling the air. Music played low and steady, a pleasant backdrop to the cheerful chatter. Everyone looked like they were deep in conversation or cracking jokes, their faces lit with genuine smiles. There were drinks on the patio table, paper plates stacked high with food, the whole 9 yards. It was a full-blown family barbecue. The only problem, I didn't know a damn thing about it. I paused at the door, just taking it all in for a second. A strange sense of detachment washing over me. It felt like walking into someone else's party in your own house. I kept my expression neutral, a mask over the simmering resentment. I spotted my wife Sarah laughing with her parents near the patio table, her face carefree. Before I could even speak, one of Sarah's aunts noticed me and waved me over. "Ethan, come grab this for me real quick," she called out, her voice bright. I nodded, forcing a tight smile, and made my way across the yard. I'd never had any issues with her extended family, honestly. I always got along better with some of them than with Sarah herself these days. So I swallowed my bitterness and went to help. As I handed over the tray, she needed another relative leaned in with a curious smile and asked, "Hey, where have you been all day? We've been here for hours. Didn't you know we were coming?" And just like that, the final piece clicked into place. I was excluded. I barely opened my mouth to respond when my sister-in-law, Olivia, cut through the chatter. Her voice loud and clear for everyone to hear. "You know, if Ethan disappeared tomorrow, I don't think anyone would even notice." The laughter that followed was immediate, an explosion of mirth. And to top it all off, Sarah, my wife added, "I didn't even know you weren't around. It was meant to be a joke, sure, but it felt like a punch to the gut. It wasn't a joke to me." So I raised my hot dog like it was a glass of fine wine, gave a half smile that didn't reach my eyes, and said, "Challenge accepted." Nobody said anything after that. A few people glanced at me, probably thinking I was joking too, but I wasn't. That was the precise moment I made the decision. I was done being invisible in my own life. By the time the barbecue finally wound down and most of the guests had left the house, was still buzzing faintly with residual energy. This was the night I had been considering leaving my marriage, and with what had just been said to me, I wasn't going to wait for things to get worse. I didn't need much. Just the basics, a couple of changes of clothes, my laptop important documents, and enough cash to tide me over in a duffel bag. Before walking out the door, I left a copy of the signed divorce papers right in the middle of the kitchen counter where she'd have to see it in the morning. On top of it, a small yellow sticky note placed neatly read, "You noticed yet?" Then I walked out, locked the door behind me, got into my car, and drove off into the night. That same night, I deleted every social media account tied to my name, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all gone. Then I pulled out my old prepaid phone, swapped out the SIM card, and tossed the original one into a storm drain at a gas station 2 towns over. I didn't want to be found, not by her, not by anyone. I just couldn't keep hurting myself by staying. I drove to a small secluded cabin I had seen earlier that was listed on an obscure classified site, owned by a retired guy who didn't ask too many questions. I paid 3 months upfront in cash. It was deep enough in the woods to feel like the world had forgotten about it, but close enough to a small town that I could grab groceries when I needed them. I made a living doing small freelance gigs online, enough to cover food, electricity, and the few basic needs I allowed myself. The days bled into each other, a peaceful, unstructured rhythm. There was no schedule, no pressure. I'd wake up to the sound of birdsong, the quiet rustle of leaves outside my window. Weeks turned into months. My beard grew out, a testament to the passage of time. I started eating better, sleeping more deeply than I had in years, and thinking with a clarity I hadn't known was possible. Not once did I check on Sarah, because I finally realized I didn't need to. That chapter was closed, and no good ever comes from reopening a wound just to see if it still bleeds. 8 months after I left, an unexpected urge led me to check one of my old email accounts, looking for some personal file I had backed up years ago. It was an account I hadn't logged into since before I left. I wasn't expecting anything. The moment I opened the inbox, I froze. There were dozens of emails, all from Sarah. At first, I didn't know what to think. Part of me didn't want to read them. I hovered over the delete button, more than once, my finger trembling. But eventually a morbid curiosity, or perhaps a lingering flicker of hope, made me click. The earliest ones were furious, filled with raw, unbridled rage. She was demanding to know where I went, calling me selfish, a coward, and heartless. She accused me of abandoning her, swearing I had no right to just vanish, vowing to find me and drag me to court. Her words were sharp, cutting deep even through the screen. But as I moved through the emails chronologically, the tone slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to shift. Her words started softening. There were still questions, but they weren't filled with rage anymore. They were unsure, hesitant, like she was beginning to hear her own voice in the silence I had left behind. The most recent ones, however, hit me differently. I remember staring at one in particular. She said the bank had started sending warnings, something about missed payments, that foreclosure might be coming. She admitted she was now working 2 jobs, desperately trying to keep the house afloat. She wrote that she had to send her sister Olivia and the kids away. They weren't helping. She wrote like she finally saw what I had been trying to explain for years. In one message, she wrote, "I get it now, Ethan. I understand why you were so distant. I just wish I hadn't been so blind." Another one read, "I wish you'd come home. Not because I need help, but because I miss you. Because I finally understand what you gave up trying to hold everything together." Then came the one that took the wind out of me, leaving me breathless. She wrote, "I was stupid. I took you for granted. I thought you'd always be around, no matter how much I ignored you. I still haven't signed the divorce papers. I keep hoping one day you'll walk through the door." I sat there, staring at that screen, the words blurring before my eyes. I won't lie to you. I felt something. My chest ached, a sharp, familiar pain reading those words. I knew that side of her, the side that could love deeply, the side that wanted to build something real with me once upon a time. And maybe, just maybe, this was that version of her finally pushing through the noise, finally seeing. But feelings aren't enough sometimes. For years I had stayed in that house, convincing myself that love would fix things, that time would heal all wounds. But now, even reading those emails, as emotional as they were, I didn't know if I could ever step back into that life. At this point, it had been exactly a year since I vanished, a full year of living off the grid, cutting ties, and breathing freely for the first time in a long time. I only went into town once every couple of weeks for supplies, maintaining my solitude. That day, I stopped by this little coffee shop I'd come to like. It was tucked away on the edge of the city, unassuming and quiet. I walked in, ordered my usual black coffee, and was waiting at the pickup counter when I heard someone say my name. At first I ignored it, but the second time it came firmer, more surprised. I turned. It was Ryan, an old mutual friend. His eyes widened as if he'd just seen a ghost, which I guess in a way he had. We exchanged awkward small talk. I kept it brief, didn't give much away. Less than a week later, there was a gentle knock at my cabin door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I peeked through the curtain, and there she was. Sarah. For a moment, I didn't move, my heart pounding in my chest. Then slowly, I opened the door, keeping my expression flat. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. She didn't speak. Instead, she just broke down sobbing, her shoulders shaking, tears streaming down her face. She kept repeating how sorry she was that she didn't know it had gotten that bad, that she wished she'd listened more and understood sooner. I didn't interrupt. I just let her speak, letting the raw emotion wash over me. When she finally finished, her voice hoarse, I stepped outside with her, looked her straight in the eyes, and said, "I'll come back, Sarah, but only to end this the right way. I'll sign what needs signing. We'll wrap this up like adults. But I can't be your husband again. Not after everything. Not after what your sister put me through. Not after you stood by and let it happen." She didn't argue. There was no fight left in her, no desperate plea. Just a slow, defeated nod. She wiped her face, tried to smile through her tears, but couldn't. And with that, she left, disappearing back into the trees, leaving me alone with my thoughts. Valuable lessons to heed. Reflecting on everything, it's truly strange how people only begin to see the value of something or someone when it's already gone. That, sadly, is one of the hardest lessons life teaches you, and it's a lesson I both had to give and live through. For years, I stayed in a marriage that was clearly falling apart, clinging to the hope of what once was. But what nobody tells you is that love, no matter how deep, cannot survive when one person is desperately trying to hold it together and the other has emotionally checked out. I endured constant disrespect, belittling, and the sheer chaos that came with my sister-in-law and her kids, all because I loved Sarah. I became a ghost in my own home, utterly invisible. But the crazy thing is, it all only started making sense to her after I vanished. That's when she finally realized what I had been trying to say all along. And maybe, just maybe, that's what some people truly need, the absence of what they always assumed would stay. So if you're reading this, and you're in a situation where you feel like your presence is being taken for granted, I truly hope my story gives you something profound to think about. Don't wait until you're completely broken, just to prove that you were whole to begin with. And if you're someone who's been pushing someone away, ask yourself why it takes their absence for you to finally see their worth. I'd really love to hear your thoughts on all this. Drop a comment below and share your own experience. If you've been through something similar, or even if you haven't, tell me what you think. And if you know someone who might need to hear this kind of story today, please share it with them. You never know who's sitting quietly with their bags already packed, just waiting for one more reason to disappear. Thanks for being here.